Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, Jason Miles, on another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Glad to have you here. If you like what we're doing, please hit like and subscribe. It is a passive gesture that goes a long way. If you're a returning listener, subscriber, or one of our very valued patrons, so glad to have you back. We will be going to the champagne room tonight after the main show. And if you want to join us, there's only one way. Become a patron for as little as $3 a month or $30 for the year. You can access champagne rooms past and present. Join us for movie nights and so much more. Now, let's get to why we're here in the first place. What's going on in Latin America? Recent parliamentary elections in Venezuela have reaffirmed the ruling coalition led by President Nicolas Maduro. With the opposition boycotting the vote, a strategy they've employed before, the government was able to consolidate its grip on power. While turnout was reportedly around 43%, the political implications go far beyond electoral participation. What does this consolidation mean for the Venezuelan people, particularly in a country grappling with years of economic warfare and sanctions? Meanwhile, USAID, long tool of U.S. soft power and regime change across the global south, has officially ended its operations. But what does the disappearance of one agency mean for countries like Cuba, which have long been targets of U.S. destabilization efforts? Is this the end of intervention or simply its next evolution? As the deportations under the Trump administration continue at a disturbing pace, new partnerships are forming under the guise of security cooperation. Ecuador and El Salvador are increasingly becoming extensions of the U.S. carceral state functioning as prison colonies south of the border. What are the material consequences of this arrangement for working class and marginalized communities in those countries? To unpack these developments and more, we're joined by journalist and analyst Camila Escalante. Please welcome Camila. Welcome to This is Revolution. This is your first time on the show.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for taking the time to talk with me. Venezuela had some elections recently. Is there any evidence that the opposition is gaining traction with the Venezuelan public? Or has the boycott strategy backfired on them?
Well, it's a really, it's kind of a repeat of what we've seen time and time again for some number of years, which is that when the opposition doesn't feel like they have a good footing electorally or they don't have prospects in the country, they call on their followers to boycott the election and to not participate in the ballot. Remember, these are not presidential elections. The presidential elections in Venezuela were held on July 28th of last year. This is governor and regional elections. And so just like in any country, at least in North America, these elections have a far lower turnout. And that was the case in Venezuela. And that was the case in Venezuela in 2021 when they, elected their last National Assembly, that there was a far lower turnout than you would see in a presidential election. And of course, that was in part because of the campaign by the far right to get people to not participate in the process. There's also calls, there have also been calls that campaign largely comes from the exterior as well, from the OAS, the now former Secretary General, Luis Almagro, was one of the people who called on the Venezuelans to not participate in this election to try to delegitimize the process. They want to say that the electoral processes in Venezuela under the Bolivarian Revolution, which is now, the last 25 years, are not free, they're not transparent, and that the conditions don't exist for proper elections to be held. But in doing so, they lost the governorships of the states that were almost all, if not all, won by Chavismo, by the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, which is the governing party. which President Nicolas Maduro is a part of. And they also won the majority of the National Assembly. And the National Assembly was actually won by the Venezuelan opposition in 2015. And you know, when they participate, they do win seats. It's not there's no you couldn't argue that the Venezuelan opposition doesn't have support. They do have support, and there are people who are very unhappy with the way they see things being in the country. And there's also a lot of people in the country who are victim to the propaganda campaigns that exist in the mainstream media, the international media, and they go along with those calls by the right wing, the far right, calling for sanctions and for more aggression against Nicaragua and its authorities, which really just is, amounts to sanctions that cause harm to normal working class people in Venezuela. So, the end result was that the United Socialist Party of Venezuela performed very well in these elections. And it seems that the opposition does not want to participate in any sort of electoral politics anymore. They want to come to power through a coup, through other illegal means, through destabilizing the country, through different sorts of campaigns, targeting Venezuelan people and their morale. And that includes the unilateral coercive measures, the sanctions that uh, that have been imposed by the United States, by U.S. allies. That includes Europe, that includes Canada. And there have been over 1,000 sanctions waged against Venezuela since 2015. About 40% of those sanctions were from Washington, and the rest of them were from Washington's allies, and they have made it extremely difficult for the Venezuelan people to access basic supplies, medical supplies, medicine, and foods. And a lot of things went missing for a number of years, but the Venezuelan economy has now bounced back under President Maduro's leadership. And it's going to be really hard for the Venezuelan opposition to factor in. And, they're trying to factor in through these all sorts of like campaigns that are funded by external actors, external governments, and their NGOs through which they channel money into the country. But Venezuela seems to be a stronghold for this sort of movement towards building socialism in Latin America, and it seems like that's not going to be changing anytime soon.
Now, under the Biden administration, Maduro was able to work with Biden for a little bit to ease some of the sanctions. Chevron was pumping oil, and now Trump is rolling a lot of that back. You've been to Venezuela not too recently. Are the sanctions taking its toll on the people as far as support? I mean, a good amount of people didn't show up to vote. Is there a little bit of apathy? I mean, it would be understandable.
I think overall, the sanctions have taken a toll on the Venezuelan people and their morale and their attitude towards the government. Uh, you know, Hugo Chavez, who came to power in 1999, was hugely popular, and they won a great number of elections, but by majorities. And undoubtedly, these elections that were imposed first by President Obama have had a really, have taken a huge toll on, the economies of Venezuelan families, particularly during those years from 2015 to 2020, let's say 2021, when it was very difficult to get, people had a difficult time getting their hands on basic supplies, like some of the cooking ingredients that they would normally use. And there were, there was difficulty that still exists today because of the salaries being relatively low compared to other countries and the hyperinflation that made it extraordinarily difficult to buy these products. And that has all, a lot of that has changed. But at the same time, these campaigns are meant to target different, demographics within Venezuela. And for instance, there have been campaigns targeting Venezuelans to try to get them to leave their country. When people are applying for asylum in the United States, they come from a country like Venezuela. Basically, the United States says that they can come in and they can have, the ability to be in the country on some sort of conditional basis temporarily or
Mhm.
with the ability to work, but they have to say that they're leaving their country for because they're being repressed, because they are, politically persecuted or whatever, whatever it is they say in order to be there. And a lot of times they're not really living a higher quality life on the exterior. A lot of people have been coerced into leaving Venezuela to go to neighboring countries, to Colombia, to Brazil, to Peru, to Chile, to Argentina and Ecuador, where they have faced a lot of xenophobia, racism, and exploitation. When they work jobs in these countries, they're getting paid far less than people from those countries, and facing huge discrimination. And it's all because they were lured there. Obviously, anyone would want to leave a country where they didn't feel that they had sufficient economic opportunities or opportunities to grow career wise, especially as a young person. But what ended up happening is that they were leaving their country and going to these countries and even facing violence and hostility from the people in those countries sometimes, but from law enforcement, from immigration there, and things like that. And that's all just part of the, psychological warfare that targets people in these countries. And Venezuela is not the only one. They've tried to do this to the people of Cuba for many decades, and also the people of Nicaragua since the Sandinista revolution took power. And so it's ongoing. So, of course, there are people who, when you meet Venezuelans in the exterior,
Mhm.
like in the US and Canada, you're going to meet a lot of people who have a lot of negative things to say about what they call communism or socialism and their country and their government. But at the same time, I mean, did you, I don't know if you said that you've been to Venezuela. Have you been to
I
Venezuela?
haven't been to Venezuela because the one time I was in South America, I was a touring musician for years, and so we toured Brazil, but it was around 2019, so they had blocked the borders,
Oh, wow.
and we weren't allowed to go. So the one time I had a chance, um, I didn't get a chance to go.
Yeah, well, things in 2019 were particularly difficult because of the sanctions.
Mhm,
Venezuela had a very difficult time replacing spare parts, fixing its refineries, um, and things got very expensive. There were shortages of basic supplies and foods and medicines, and things have drastically improved. And for that reason, a lot of Venezuelans have gone back to the country. And so, they say that these, what the Chavistas say is that this new round of elections, uh, represents a next step in the continuation of their process towards socialism, and all of the different initiatives that are being led by the grassroots. And so it's really important. Venezuela has been a model in terms of, um, in terms of having taken its own path
mhm,
that is, different from the path of the countries that basically live under the guardianship of the United States or are lackeys to the United States. But also, Venezuela has taken leadership when it comes to confronting fascism, and specifically, President Nicolas Maduro uh, launched, or he was the person behind the Anti-Fascist International,
mhm,
which was launched last year in 2024, with the idea that there's rising fascism in the world, in Europe, and all across the Americas. and everywhere else, and that revolutionary forces, anti-imperialist forces, social movements have to come together to be able to confront that. And I think that's really incredible that we have such leadership in Latin America, because we're also facing really difficult times. We do have some far right leaders and some neoliberal US stooges in power as well.
And we can definitely get into that. One last thing. Okay, well, I guess we can move on. I know you don't have a lot of time. USAID is officially wrapping up. What does this signify for US soft power in Latin America?
Yeah, so I don't know if you got into it in any of the other discussions, but of course,
We did a
with
whole show on the history of USAID a few weeks ago.
oh, yeah, so the Trump administration was threatening to cut funding to this sort of foreign assistance, which is USAID or USAID or USAID, because actually State Department and US government officials call it all of those things.
Mhm.
Um, they said that USAID and NED were, funding things like indigenous, feminist basket weaving collectives and Iraqi Sesame Street and everything else. And they said this was a waste of funding. A lot of people around the world and even the US probably already knew that money was being channeled into all these different projects that are highly questionable, and that these are, these recipients and these entities in the different countries. A lot of them are global South countries, but actually they're also active in uh,
Africa.
Asia,
Yeah.
Eurasia. So it's actually on all continents. There are different projects and entities receiving this money. Uh, but it's like it's not transparent at all. These are organizations that are receiving this money that call themselves NGOs. They
Mhm.
call themselves environmentalist, feminist, whatever it is, but they're really receiving money from a foreign government. And normally, in most of these countries, there exists some sort of foreign agents laws. And under a foreign agents laws, you should be required to register and let the government of the country know what activities you're doing. And anytime a country such as Cuba, Nicaragua, or Venezuela, or any others, came up with these sorts of regulations to try to know what kind of money is coming into their country, what organizations they're funding, what sort of activities they're doing. Of course, a lot of times it was funding opposition groups and opposition leaders or figures. These so-called human rights organizations internationally would say that that is repressive, that
Mhm.
they were suppressing free speech, that people don't have freedom of thought, that in the case of Nicaragua, for example, these supposed human rights voices and organizations have said that Nicaragua was attacking the churches, the Catholic Church, people's religious freedom, the universities, all sorts of ridiculous claims, when really what Nicaragua was doing, and many other countries that have created their own laws against this and enforced them, is they were making sure they knew where this money was coming from and where it was going. These people, even for tax reasons, should be reporting this money. But you really can't just go and fund these sorts of activities in another country without facing consequences. Surely, if Nicolas Maduro started funding an organization like Black Alliance for Peace in the United States, that would
Mhm.
be a problem. If he began sending $300,000 a year to BAP, there would be a problem. You can't do that as a Venezuelan government, say that this organization that's very critical of the US government is going to receive money from a foreign government. So, when Western governments do it, it's okay, but for some reason, it's not, it wouldn't be acceptable the other way around. So that money that supposedly the Trump administration was going to, temporarily suspend, and they were going to audit and all of these different things, it turns out that that they're going to restore that funding to the Ned and USAID and foreign assistance. And that was the plan all along, really. They just wanted to centralize control
Hmm.
over those sorts of so-called foreign assistance to the State Department and put it under the control directly of Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And Marco Rubio is someone who is very knowledgeable about what U.S. interests are, what U.S. interests are abroad, who U.S. enemies are. He's very explicitly anti-communist. He's against any of these, sort of governments and social movements and revolutionary parties that oppose imperialism and who take their own independent and sovereign path. And so, the sort of, what's called regime change programs and operations are going to continue. They're going to continue to put money into destabilizing the countries that are stated enemies of the United States. They're funding things like, right-wing propaganda outlets,
But
that,
that's the thing. Sorry to cut you off. Is America using its ability to use look, I'm not a proponent of soft power, but the influence of the West was extremely powerful for a long time, and we are losing that influence. You can see it in pop culture, right? I know more young people here in Mexico where I live that love K-pop than they do, I don't know, insert popular American rapper here. So much so that anime is like a look a lot of the young people try to achieve here through their makeup and even with little hairdos, which I find kind of funny. And you can see that even in the States as well, with the younger, what they call Gen Alpha. So it feels like the soft power of America that we see through pop culture, different kinds of music. I mean, reggaeton is pretty big throughout the West. Is dismantling this or putting it in different hands going to really change the way you can influence a people through culture and just try to influence people through heavy-handed authoritarians?
well, I think that, you know, these sorts of projects that have been funded by foreign assistance have had their role. A lot of times they're funding the media. So it's not just, soft power through influencing culture, but it's also, doing things like making sure that they have progressive forces under control under all of these countries.
Mhm.
That's what they tried to do. They tried to infiltrate the left wing, whether it's an organization that calls itself socialist or social democratic or whatever it is. They tried to infiltrate, let's say the right wing of the Workers' Party of Brazil and things like that, to ensure that that these countries get pulled to the right and they get pulled towards the U.S. sphere of influence and away from China and Russia and Iran and everyone else in Venezuela. So I still think that they have their role. The Ned has a journal. It has a journal that it publishes where I'm sure that its contributors are highly paid, and they're people from countries like Bolivia,
Mhm.
like this woman named Janice Vacadaza, and she played a key role in creating a lot of noise online about supposed ecocide in 2019 in Bolivia when she was opposing Evo Morales in the lead up to the coup against Evo in 2019. She was saying that the socialist government was, committing crimes against the environment, committing environmental crimes, and doing a lot of sort of campaigning about that in the exterior, internationally. And this person still today, this month, is publishing in the Ned's journal, articles about the environment. And this is all done, over time, continuously, in order to undermine any effort from the left which of course, all sorts of laws protecting the environment were created under Evo Morales and the movement towards socialism during his presidency. But that's not the kind of thing. That's not the kind of thing that these people would be publishing. They're trying to, get the international left to oppose any sort of socialist building efforts in Latin America. So I still think that this sort of money that's going in every which direction and funding these really shady actors in these countries still has a role. But yeah, at the same time, the U.S. is, moving towards more aggressive and overt types of meddling and interference, and they're not really denying it.
For a country like Cuba, which has long accused USAID of subversion, is this an actual win, or does it just mean covert methods moving forward?
Is what an actual win?
The 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 destabilization of USAID.
Well, all those basically, Cuba is number one. It tops the list of countries that uh, are receiving this NED money, this money from the National Endowment for Democracy. So in 2024, they approved uh, Congress and the executive or whatever of the NED approved $6.6 million going towards Cuba. It's, whatever it is, they want to, put money towards programs that are focused on democracy and human rights and all that sort of thing. From USAID, it's like a number much larger than that. It might be like, I don't know, even like $20 million. Um, and so that money is still going to go to those different entities that are going to continue targeting Cuba, even if they're news outlets that claim to be Cuba. They are actually based in Miami. They're based in
Wow.
the US. And so it's, what Bruno Rodriguez, the foreign minister of Cuba, has said is that people are enriching themselves. They're getting very rich off this sort of regime change industry, and they're collecting money, and their job is solely to oppose the government and create these campaigns and create these sort of, psyops online and spread disinformation about the country. So it is a big problem. At the same time, like you said, people's views are changing in light of the genocide, in light of everything that's
Yeah.
going on, and the way in which people are actually seeing that a lot of these countries in the global south have been US lackeys for so long. They've been partnered with the United States and they haven't really benefited. They haven't reaped any rewards for following the US's footsteps. They have just as much inequality and low salaries and a bad economy as anyone else. So they're looking, these governments are beginning to look to China and the Belt and Road Initiative, and they're looking in other directions. And the US simply doesn't have influence over Latin America like it once did.
Um, I know I don't have you for much longer, but I did want to talk to you about Central America a little bit. Deportations under Trump have reached alarming levels. Um, why is El Salvador positioning itself as an extension of the U.S. carceral state?
Well, it must be just for money. I think that Nayib Bukele all along has had, similar interests to the United States. He's interested in enriching himself and his family. He's interested in creating, sort of PR campaigns. He's not particularly interested in improving the, living conditions of regular Salvadorans. And he believes that, the answer to crime in the country is to build prisons and stick everyone in there and have everybody working for this sort of carceral state, uh, expanding the military, expanding the police force, and those are not really quality jobs. That's not what an advanced society would have. Obviously, all countries have to have security forces, and they have to have, they have to have security. But the expansion was very large and very rapid, And now he's, talking about building more prisons in order to continue housing foreign, non-Salvadoran prisoners, um, which, people are already denouncing as being, uh, these are prisons that look uh, and seem to be more like concentration camps. They're places where people are being sent in the last 2 months, where there's no rule of law. The people that have been sent there, primarily from Venezuela, have not stood before a judge in El Salvador. They haven't stood
Mhm.
before a judge in Venezuela. And who knows what the process was when they were being processed to be transferred to El Salvador. They're not able to speak with any sort of a lawyer, and no sort of official list has been provided to the government of Venezuela to be able to communicate to their family members that they're even in El Salvador. These people have not committed crimes. Neither their presence in the United States was necessarily a crime. A lot of them entered on a completely legal basis with some sort of permit to be in the country, and they didn't overstay or anything. Uh, but they definitely didn't commit any sort of additional crime. They weren't members of any sort of gang. And we know that because the US government hasn't even bothered trying to show any evidence of them being a part of any crime. In passing, they have made some social media posts showing body parts with tattoos on them. I mean, that's not any sort of conviction. I mean, that's not like a criminal court conviction. That's literally just showing somebody's tattoos. So, so it's just a very odd situation where people are being sent to a third country on false pretenses with no information about when they're going to be, if they're ever going to be released, and not even any real crimes or real claims about what their crimes might have been. So it's a really dangerous thing that's taking place there. And obviously, everybody should be very concerned that you can just be arrested in a country and not have to stand before a judge, not have the ability to speak to legal, and not be able to see medical or anything like that, and be sent to a prison in a third country, not returned to your country, not deported to your country. If they continue to do what's happening in El Salvador, now in Ecuador and in Libya and in other countries that are being threatened right now, that's really bad news. I mean, there's just so many reasons why that's absolutely
Well,
illegal and scary. And
yeah.
it at one point it'll even happen to US citizens.
Well, I mean, it is to a very small degree, right? Because we don't know how they're figuring out who's a quote unquote baddie and who's not, but it definitely isn't your, just going through roles of who's here on a visa or not, because there's literally cases of American born citizens. And I don't mean ethnic American born citizens with Latin last names. I mean, just white people getting the same email that they had so long to vacate, or they were, you know, ICE was coming to get them. Recently, I saw a story of a young girl from Georgia, a young Mexican girl from Georgia who was a college student, had all her proper paperwork, and still was in ICE detention for, I think, a month or two. Um, it is very frightening, and to see other nations backing this up, and also going forward with this story that there's this violent gang coming out of Venezuela. I'm going to say the name wrong. I said it wrong like 15 times.
Uh-huh. Tren de
Aragua?
Aragua. Uh-huh.
Aragua. I always say agua.
Aragua.
Aragua. Um, Making this out to be an invasion, which is kind of ludicrous to think. But the same thing was done with MS-13 years prior. Are we just repeating the same script in the US?
I think it's far worse. So, I mean, in this case, Venezuela is, it's the opposite of a failed state. It is a central power, a central government that has control over, the complete territory of Venezuela and has made huge strides in combating transnational crime and gangs and narco trafficking within their own territory. And the government of Venezuela says that they have exterminated and incarcerated uh, all of the Tren de Aragua within its own borders. And so at this point, the supposed gang, to the extent which it does exist in the United States, now only exists in the United States because it's not in Venezuela. They're trying to make up lies from the State Department and from the White House that the leadership of this gang is supposedly the Venezuelan government itself. That's commanding over this. So this is just all like the sort of, setup towards a sort of false flag in order to carry out more acts of aggression against Venezuela because they have failed to destabilize and overthrow this government during all their uh, other attempts. Unfortunately, it's also just the strategy of the U.S. government to try to work with its partners in the media and podcasting and everyone else to try to get everyone in the country scared of foreigners, of immigrants, and of all these other groups and things like that, so that they can push home another agenda.
How do the people of El Salvador feel about their country being kind of turned into a de facto prison colony?
I think people are afraid to speak out. Um, it's it's really difficult because President Nayib Bukele was elected with strong support the first time around, and not only was he elected into the presidency, but his new political party, Nuevas Ideas, had a lot of support in local elections as well. They, voted in people into the National Assembly of Venezuela and to the mayorships of the municipalities and all of that, and they performed uh, well as in the last elections in which he was reelected. Um, Unfortunately, things are starting to change. There are, some economic problems that have arisen. There have been cuts in the areas of health and education. There have been really significant layoffs. And there's not a whole lot of economic opportunities for young people or career advancement opportunities. And a lot of young professionals or young people are still needing to seek opportunities in other countries like Mexico, like Argentina, like Spain, or the US. And so I think people have become more critical. And it's really indefensible, some of the things that they've seen their government do. And so we are beginning to see more and more criticism, and at the same time, more repression of those voices. And there are some political prisoners right now in El Salvador. So it's a really difficult, time to speak out. And But we're still in the very beginning phases of his new presidential mandate. But it seems like, things are just going to become increasingly difficult there. At the end of the day, with everything that's taking place there, it is the Salvadoran people that are the real victims there. A really
Mm.
strong campaign has come out in support of Venezuelan families and people who are being, targeted in the United States, and the xenophobia they're facing. That's very much targeted uh, at Venezuelans in the U.S., but in El Salvador, it's really the Salvadoran people whose quality of life is going to suffer, and who face arrest, under arbitrary conditions and all of that. Their rights are being violated as well.
So Bukele also apparently has ties to MS-13. Has that hurt him at all? The news that came out that he was working with MS-13 leadership.
I don't know that that's news that came out during his mayorship. Uh, that was news that he had negotiated with the gangs, and that's how he was able to cut down crime in the capital as mayor of San Salvador just prior to his presidency. Um, I don't know. I don't know any details about that, but you know, a lot of deals could be made to, try to protect, some of the leaders of these criminal organizations, and I wouldn't put it past him to do something like that. But yeah, that's something that's been swirling around for several years now.
Well, I've had you here for 40 minutes. I know you said you had to go soon. Is there anything you want to tell us what you're doing before you go?
Yeah, so we have Kaosachun News. My news outlet has a new website. It's kaosachun.com. It used to be another URL, another domain. So that's where you'll find my reporting is kaosachun.com, as well as Kaosachun News on social media, primarily X, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram.
And where can people find you?
And you can find me on X at Camila Press. I wish I could manage more social media accounts than that, but like just having an X account is hard enough as it is. So there, and then I also do some reporting for Press TV.
And is that what you'll be doing tomorrow? Or you can't
That's what
talk
I'm
about
gonna be
it?
doing tomorrow. Well, I do occasionally cover some of the sort of protests around the Palestine stuff.
Mhm.
So I'll be reporting tomorrow morning here in Ottawa. I don't live here normally. I just arrived here today. Some nice comrades have allowed me to work in their office.
Mhm.
And so Palestinian, solidarity organizations and activists here are going to be shutting down a major annual arms manufacturer convention, which is all the major arms manufacturers of the world come here every year. This is the largest convention in North America of its kind, and it's the weapons and its components that are being, exhibited here that are being used in Gaza to kill people. So there's going to be a big protest tomorrow. So I'll be reporting on that.
What is the Latin American feeling about what's going on in Palestine?
Well, I think
And I
everyone
guess it
thinks.
depends where your country you're in.
Yeah, but I think overwhelmingly people see that it's just an absolute catastrophe. That it's everyone sees it for what it is. In most of Latin America, and I think more so than that, taking the leadership of President Nicolas Maduro and others, they've said that if we don't stop Zionism in its tracks right now, where it is, as it's committing this genocide and committing its massacres and large scale crimes in Lebanon, in Syria, in Yemen, then it's going to reach our shores next. And so it's an urgent issue, not only because there are an entire peoples being wiped out right now, but it's going to pose larger problems for the future. And so, full solidarity with the Palestinian resistance, and that tends to be the view at this stage.
Well, good luck with your reporting tomorrow and have a very good rest of your evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Have a good night.
You too. That is Camila Escalante, reporter extraordinaire. I am Jason Miles. Usually we go for an hour. We will be going to the champagne room after the show, I promise you, where we can have some fun. Recently, we had no show Saturday because I was up north because my daughter graduated college. And I got to hang out with my family, which was nice. And I got a very inexpensive hotel in San Francisco. And I didn't pay attention to the address. Like they didn't, how they don't give you the address until you like confirm everything, you pay for everything. And oof. They were some tricky people on those photos. Cause man, someone asked, did I cry? Yep. Yep. I did. Oh yeah. Yes, I did. And so my children were there, the older three, the OG Miles kids, and my oldest son was going to drive his sister and younger brother and her boyfriend back to the East Bay where they live. And we're loitering by his car for hours, having a lot of fun. My kids were just roasting me. You guys would have really enjoyed it. And my son goes, Dad, I'll drive you back to your hotel. You don't have to walk back to your hotel. I'll drive you back. And my son's car was like, I haven't seen it. It was my first time seeing it. I'd seen pictures of it. And it was just the most N-wordy car I'd ever seen. Like his car screamed N-word. But he's not. He's not like that at all. Those kids grew up in the suburbs with their mom and stepdad. And I was like, you can't, like, I'm staying so far in the hood, kid. Like, you can't drive this car to my hotel. It's not going to work out well for you. And yeah, I'll talk a little bit in the champagne room about kind of what I saw and how I felt about it, because I didn't know. San Francisco's always had a homeless problem. It's always been bad. It's not like going there in the 90s. It was this pleasant playground. There's always been open drug use since I can remember. But whoa, that shit was thick. Yikes. Sid Nana says, what model and make? Yeah, it's pretty bad. He's got an older BMW and it's black with front tint. It's the kind of car that makes police say, "We coming for you, nigga." Yeah. Like, I've never seen a car actually say, "We coming for you, nigga." Like, it's just an alarm that would have went off. And I'm like, you can't drive this where I'm staying, son. Like, I'll walk. It's okay. I'd rather walk than you guys get either fucked with by the police or somebody thinking that you're like actually pushing weight. So it says, someone says, does it have spinners? No, it's not 2005. So his car does not have spinners. But yeah, it was not. I was like, oof. I was like, and you're a good kid too. So if you got pulled over, they would just fuck with you. Like, nah, dude. And it was a Friday night too. Can't do it. Was it a lowrider? Yeah, he hella, because he's half Asian, so he just Asianed it out. It is the perfect mix of N-word and Asian car that screams Bay Area, right? Like, he cut his muffler and shit like that. The suspension was all dropped. It's made for performance. He actually said that the car was making a noise, and my daughter's boyfriend said something to him about it, and he looked over and he goes, "Look, there's too many of you guys in the back. This car is made for performance. It's not made for shuffling you people around." Someone says, "I wonder if anyone was there from the show." I don't know, but you know what, Timothy? Walking down the street, people was talking to me like they knew me. So I was like, maybe I do know some of these names. Anton says, get him a minivan. Oof. I think that kid would be very mad if someone made him get a minivan. I mean, he bought the car himself. He bought what he wanted. I think when you're young, you want to look a certain way. There's a status symbol you want to have with a car, and he definitely has worked hard, quote unquote, saved his money and got something he wanted. But I just shook my head the whole time. I was like, you can't drive an N-word mobile like this. The worried dad in me was just like, oh God. Oh, so it's the car from Wiz Khalifa's Black and Yellow. I don't know. It's just one of those cars where it's like, ooh. I remember I wanted a Cadillac when I was really young, younger than him. And my grandmother had an old one, and I kept begging her to just give it to me because she wouldn't drive it. And she said no. Because she's like, somebody's gonna knock you in the head for that car. And I was like, but now I kind of understand that logic. Because I would have, done all the things to it that I could have afforded to do. See, Tanya Marshall says San Francisco has always had homeless problems. When the 1984 Democratic Convention was held there, you could call a number and get a free hotel room for a couple days. Oh, wow. Not the case now. Jason was trying to be. I was in my youth. God, who wasn't? It was the 90s. It's a different time. Let's go to the champagne room. And should I open up the phone lines? I don't know. Let me know if you want me to. I was going to open up the phone lines for the Friday show on Black Fatigue. That's going to be a fun show. I was talking to Teray for hours today about Black Fatigue. So I think I might open up the phone lines for Saturday. Not 100% sure yet, but I'm leaning towards opening them up. But thank you guys. And let's get out of here. Anton says, okay, I'll hurry up and end the show, Anton. Thank you guys so much. And I am out.